think that's why being a coach and an entrepreneur work really well together, because we're so selfless in what we do. Blends really well with being an entrepreneur because you're trying to serve other people's needs. What do we do every day? We serve the needs of our athletes.
One of the first steps in building your personal brand is to create your very own website. This week's sponsor, Bluehost, makes it very easy and inexpensive to do that. I've used Bluehost for years. There's no shortage of hosting companies out there, but their price, one-step integration with WordPress, and customer service make them a no-brainer. To get started, go to ronmckeefery.com/Bluehost. There, I walk you through step-by-step how to get your very first website in just minutes. Buying through my link is at no extra cost to you, but it does support me and the show, allow me to continue to bring this show to you for free. Again, go to ronmckeefery.com/Bluehost. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome back, guys, to Overtime. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and I am on a mission to help coaches retire being coaches. If this is the first time you're joining us, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on all the podcast platforms, or if you like me and you like video, make sure to subscribe to me on YouTube, and these episodes will live there on video and in the podcast world and audio. This week, I'm joined by a good buddy of mine, Mike Bewley. He's a strength and conditioning coach for basketball at Clemson. Mike and I have entered the profession about the same time, and a guy that is in my inner circle, a guy that I trust, that I go to for advice on a number of things, not just coaching, but is a super entrepreneur and very successful at what he does, man. So excited to have you on the show, brother.
Yeah, man. Excited to be here. This is awesome. And I'm not zoomed out yet, man. So this is awesome. I get to
all right. You'll be
Saturday, right?
We're shooting this during the coronavirus time, and I think as many Zoom calls as we're both on a week, it is definitely difficult.
No, this is great. This is one I was really looking forward to this week. So, man.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Likewise. Mike, give us just a quick Reader's Digest version of your coaching journey. And then at what point during that journey did you get bit by the entrepreneurial bug?
Yeah, sure. So real quick, never dreamt that I'd be doing what I'm doing. I was 96. I don't even know if strength conditioning was really a mainstream at the time. But Bill Curry got fired from University of Kentucky. All of those minions got dispersed across the country. One graduate assistant landed at a Telford YMCA where I was sports training. And took a liking to me. I took a liking to him and kind of showed me the ropes of strength conditioning. And about 6 months later, his former boss contacted him, said, "Hey, man, I need you at University of Nevada, Reno." So I got a graduate assistant position. He's like, "I'm done with that. I got a wife that's pregnant, and this is the path I'm going, but I got this kid, and that kid was me."
Right.
And Leanne Cataldo, which is Leanne Blinn, was actually an assistant out there at the time. And so did a couple of phone interviews and didn't hear anything for another 6 months. And then coach called me up one day and he's like, "Hey, man, you still want this job?" And I was like, "Yeah." I actually was getting ready to start a job down in Clearwater, Florida at a private sports conditioning studio. So jumped in a car, me and a buddy, and we went cross country and got out there in 2 days, 18 hours, and boom, that was it. I was hooked on that. From there, I got my first job at Georgia Southern, and unbelievable experience. I kind of went from seeing what a losing culture looked like to a really successful culture, and then got my first head coaching job at University of Dayton up in Ohio. I met my wife there. It was tremendous. Had great success there, and was asked by Coach Gregory to go to Georgia Tech with him to rebuild that program. Spent 4 or 5 seasons there, and then made a name for myself in the ACC, and Coach Brad Brownell called me and said, "Hey, if I wanted to be a Tiger." So it was a no-brainer. Atlanta traffic versus Clemson traffic.
Yeah, right.
And been here ever since, man, and it's been fun. So been able to help coach. We got to the Sweet 16 that first time in his career. Is on our second year, and it was the first time or fourth time in school history we'd have been able to do that. So
wow.
Yeah, so it's been a heck of a ride. And then this summer we won the University World Games. We won Olympic gold. So I would have never told anybody, "Hey, Mike, you have a chance as a coach to win gold." I'd have said you're crazy. So that was an unbelievable experience that we got to have in that too. So it's been a hell of a ride.
At what point there in that journey did you really kind of start to think outside the box and start to realize that, hey man, I need to make maybe a little bit of side cash for my family, or I need to have this kind of mindful distraction of something other than just coaching?
Yeah, I kind of always had it. Both of my parents own their own business, so I've seen it, lived it. My grandfather built his company up from he built his first product in his basement and turned it into an multi-international, multi-million-dollar company. So I kind of been around it. I wish I'd have paid a hell of a lot more attention during that process, but maybe I inherited the bug and just not all the knowledge. And so no, I was always had side hustles. You're a GA, you're trying to make some sort of cash. So it came from training people,
right.
So you could pay rent and have a little bit of beer money in the meantime there. And did that, always trained and did stuff on the side there. But I think really from a real true business standpoint, really kind of came in is when I was at Georgia Southern. And 2002, the NCAA had mandated legislation about what was permissible and what wasn't. So it closed the doors on a lot of good products and it opened doors for a lot of bad. And that around 2004, I just got really kind of fed up with having to be referring guys to go to GNC to find some products. And whatever I referred them to go get, they never came back with. They ended up getting something that they weren't supposed to.
Right.
Now we're talking about compromising safety, healthy, compliancy, eligibility. And I got fed up with that. And at the time, I was also a certified specialist in sports nutrition. So I knew the value of nutrition. In fact, it's probably why I got some of the jobs that I did early on before, nutritionists became a big part of training in the college. And so I reached out to some colleagues and said, are you frustrated too? They said, hell yeah, this is BS. And I said, okay. I said, well, what if I create a product that would allow us as strength coaches just to buy? Like, you're in my inner circle here. Like, would you do that? They were like, heck yeah, I'll do it, coach. Like, I'm like, all right. And I'm like, well, what do you need it to do? And most of them are like, man, it's got to taste good, right?
Right.
It could be to do all the right stuff. And so I just took my minor in nutrition. I took everything I'd learned and had been applying from a specialist in sports nutrition. And I got with some food scientists. And that conversation, they wouldn't even have let me in the door if they hadn't said, hey, how much are you going to buy? Well, I had 5 other universities that were ready to buy, plus mine. So I had 6. So I had a pretty good volume of that. And it was I never dreamt that it would be a business. It was just like we were trying to solve a problem that we were all experiencing, that we were all frustrated about. And we just really felt like we weren't able to serve our athletes at the capacity that we once were from a nutritional standpoint. And so that kind of really kicked everything off for me. And I got a really quick crash course in manufacturing, and I didn't know anything about that, and lo and behold, that core group of 5 began to tell their other buddies, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, how do I order? And then how do I manufacture? And then I went through the process of, I had 2 business partners, which actually helped kind of front some things where they ended up stealing money from the company.
Oh, wow.
So I got to go through that process. I learned about getting them out of there and making sure I got all the rights and not taking them to court. So it was crazy, man. And I look back on it now and I'm like, man, I would have never done that. But you're just kind of in it and you're doing it. Strength coaches, it's like, boom, we're in it, we're grinding, we're doing this. And I probably really just was the drive is how much success we were having with the kids and the other schools and the other programs. And there was a point when I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. And there were so many people that were relying on it and felt like, man, this is really helping us. And then that expanded my opportunity as a coach to grow more, because we as coaches are so focused in on our 4 walls and what we do. It allowed me to become a better coach, because now I wasn't just talking about protein powders. I was talking about, hey man, what are you doing? Right. And I was fortunate. I was not a very good networking person when I started out. I was pretty horrible. I was lucky that I had people around me that were good networkers, but my businesses started to force me to network. It's like people are calling me up. I don't even know who the hell they are. And they're like, hey, I heard you got a protein product. We want to try that out. And it was like, all right, cool, coach. Hey, by the way, what are you doing up there? And it just kind of happened. And so my brand as a coach, I think, strengthened because of that. And the relationships that I have formed are some of my strongest relationships. And yeah, they started off in business, but they ended up becoming something even more. And it's been an unbelievable ride. And now what we're doing with the company, it's evolved now to where at the high school level, we all know they don't make any money at the high school level. It's right. We've evolved that into now a concessions for the weight room. And so now we do a wholesale distribution to the schools. They buy in bulk. They resell it back to the kids. And so on average, we have high schools that are generating $10,000 a year revenue for their strength conditioning budget. Awesome. We have some is generated as much as $31,000 annually. And that the best part about that is it really allows those strength coaches to kind of obviously be able to provide for the kids, but it really moves them into a modern era of strength training and conditioning.
Right.
And help support that. Man, it's been unbelievable. And our next phase now is nutrition education. We're going to bring that into it, to the fold. So we're taking all these years of trial and error with connecting with kids and nutrition. And that's the next phase for our company, is giving the coach a step-by-step guide and giving the high schools a curriculum from which to follow to bridge that gap. We created a cookbook for parents. And so now the kids get it, teachers get it, coaches get it, but mom and dad are the ones that are preparing the food, stocking the cupboards, and buying the groceries. So in our beta testing of that, the biggest feedback we've gotten now has been, thank you, no, not because I know so much more about nutrition. From the parents, it's been, we actually are around the dinner table again as a family. It's right. Important. And I'm like, wow, like how important that is, because I know how important it is for me and my family, and what it meant for my family growing up. And so yeah, it's been unbelievable, like to ride this ride. It's been tremendous, man.
What an awesome story, and so much to unpack there. I think we're talking about Critical Reload, which is the company, and you started it, I think, in 2004, maybe? 2004,
yeah.
2004. So we're talking 16 years you've had this company,
yeah.
while doing all that while coaching. And I think for somebody that maybe just, heard that, they're like, I can never do that. Like I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about manufacturing. And you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying you knew nothing about this either. You just
zero, man.
You started asking the questions, and I think that's the important part. And so I want to dial in on a couple of these, and I just want you to kind of maybe talk about how easy it can be done. Like how easy it can be done. So the first lesson there you had was market research, and really kind of reaching out to some other coaches and finding some people that were having the same problem you were having. How easy? It was literally just a phone call, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm in if you're in."
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I think every business, Fortune 500 companies, they have an idea. They're going to do a business survey, right? Yep. They're going to get that out there. They're going to say, "Hey, we're thinking about this product. It's an R&D. Does it have traction? Does it have traction regionally? Does it, whatever the case may be?" But essentially, I just called up my peers and you have to solve somebody's problem, otherwise they ain't gonna buy it, right? That's like 095 remedial business, right?
And so you create the minimum viable product there, right? Something to just get out to market, and you can start to kind of tweak and whatnot. But I think some of the concern there would be, what if my idea doesn't work? All of a sudden I brought these 5 other people in, and it's not. Talk a little bit about the psychology of that, about how it's like for you and I, failure is just part of the process. It's not something that's crippling, but for a lot of people, that fear of failure to even, to take a risk like that is to the point to where it's paralyzing.
Yeah. Well, I've always been the model of, if I'm going to ask my athletes to be comfortable being uncomfortable, then you know what, I damn well better told that line too. And so if I'm telling them to not be fearful, but yet I'm paralyzed by my own fear, that's a bad deal. And I think if you want to come across as authentic to your kids, you got to live authentic. And my kids were pretty fired up. I kind of told them about what I was doing. They kind of juiced me up. They were like, "Damn, coach, that's awesome, man! Like, you're gonna do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." They were like really fired up about it. And I was like, they were almost. I really felt like they were as excited about it as I am. And then it was like, I mean, the company is called Critical Reload. But when I got more involved in basketball specifically, they didn't even call. They were like, "Coach, give me some of that jump juice." It was like, and they started calling it their thing. And it's amazing. Like, even coming to talking about what you have is, man, don't be scared. Don't outperform your self-identity, man. You can't outperform it, right? You have to be able to go out there and do it. And I never dreamt, obviously 16 years later, and trust me, there were a lot of failures. I mean, hell, I had to take guys to court because they were stealing from me. I didn't know how to figure all that out. But I think what you have to understand too is the environment that you're in. You're in college. And so there are afforded to you lots and lots and lots of resources that other people pay a tremendous amount of money to get, that it's right there at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Right. And so here's the thing. I can build websites now. I can, but I started off with Dreamweaver, and I just called up the professor of technology at Georgia Southern and said, "Hey, man, like I got this company. It's kind of taken off. I need to be able to automate these orders. Like I need something." He was like, "Well, come over. I'll teach you HTML." So I would, like, during my lunch breaks, I would scoot over there. I would literally sit in his office. And I told him my story. He was like, "That's pretty cool. Come on." And we did it. I'm sitting there eating, and I'm like banging away. And that's how it kind of started, man. And I've really leaned a lot on the resources that are around me to help support that. And they're right there around you, man.
I think a lot of people, they're fearful of what other people's opinions would be. And when you get started or whatever, and what I've found and what you found is that rallying cry around you, like whether it's the players or other coaches or professor or anybody, they're like, "Man, that's a pretty, like, you're doing that on top of what you're doing, and that's pretty impressive," and the amount of difference between people that that have ideas but then also take action is really what separates people, and everybody is envious of the people that take action, what it really comes down to it. And they want to support that. When you're talking like the manufacturing, I think that's something that what people that are listening to would be like, "Man, there's absolutely no way. Like, how do I learn about manufacturing or how did you find the right people to talk to even know who the right people were?"
Yeah. Well, number one, I had an uncle who had a business at the time. He had a lawnmower business and sold specifically Cub Cadets. That was his thing. So I leaned on him a lot. I think, you got the business school, and I reached out to some of my business partners, people that I brought on to help, had obviously, they had business experience and understood. Now, their business ethics weren't so great, but they understood business in that regard. So believe it or not, it's funny. One of the guys that I originally hired, his brother is the one that's coming on afterwards. So he kind of came to his brother. He was my accountant, so to speak. And he was like, "Hey," he's like, "I need you to help me fix these books because I've been taking money." And he was like, "No."
Right.
Ultimately, he threw his brother under the bus and came onto the company because he kind of like, "This is kind of cool company."
Right.
But yeah, I think, you'd be surprised too if you just go over to the business office, call your college. They already have ties with local business people that you can call up and be like, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Can you give me whatever at a time?" I've never not had a reply back from somebody about that. What I have found is the business people, once they've kind of had that success, they want to be able to help other people have the same success and make sure that they didn't do the same thing wrong that they did. They're very giving that way. I mean, they're in the service industry. So like they want to serve.
Absolutely.
And I think we forget about that from I think that's why being a coach and an entrepreneur work really well together, because we're so selfless in what we do.
Right.
I think that blends really well with being an entrepreneur, because you're trying to serve other people's needs. What do we do every day? We serve the needs of our athletes. And so you're not really that far removed from being a business person when you're a coach. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to sell your program. You got to get an 18-year-old kid to buy in to what you're doing. And it's almost like you're asking him to marry you on the first date.
That's right.
Like, you know what I mean? And so I think you got to look at that as a coach, and you got to say, you know what, I am a salesman, because I have to sell that to my sport coach.
Right.
I got to let them understand that maybe, hey, there's a better way to do this than what we're going about doing. And I think there's a lot of business thing that you can draw from a coach standpoint. That
Absolutely.
That maybe just you're just fearful to maybe to underachieve.
And one other lesson in there was, you kind of outsourced. Now, granted, business ethics wasn't great and maybe got burned a little bit, but you kind of outsourced some expertise, right? You kind of took on some partners. I think that honestly, if you're going to be at a super level, as a coach, if that's your passion and you're going to stay coaching, which is what the whole point of this whole show is, then you're going to have to take on partners. You're not going to be able to be out there selling all the time or, watching the manufacturing or whatever. Talk a little bit about how you would recommend somebody setting up a good joint venture in the best protective type of way, I guess.
Yeah. Well, number one, clarity. And I think there's a couple of things. I know it's a lot of money and it seems like, damn, but I think you need to get a lawyer involved. Like, that's just an expense you're going to have to do. And trust me, I didn't in the beginning, and it cost me a lot of money. It cost me about $13,000. And it probably only cost me $5,000 if I'd have done it right the first way and structured it up the right way. If you're in a business, you're going to shares and you're going to divide maybe ownership. You don't have any money, but like, hey, we've got this great thing. Don't give up any more than 49% of your company. You need to be the number one dude, 51%. You don't budge on that. Because what you don't want to do is split it 3 ways equally, and then those 2 guys can basically vote you out.
Right.
And you're screwed. And then everything you worked for is gone there. So just because you got to think too, you're bringing somebody else your idea. You're going to probably be doing most of the work, and they're going to ride on that success. So protect what you got. And if what you have has got merit, it's good more about you and what you bring and what you have, but guard that, man. Like, don't take that for granted. Like, this is your idea. You need to protect that idea. And, but I would say from the word go, if you're ready to bring on other people, man, I would definitely get a lawyer involved in that.
Right. Agreed. But, I think, again, going back to trying the barrier of entry, worst case scenario in your situation, and maybe not, I shouldn't say worst case overall, but in your situation, that was a $13,000 hit. And yes, that was a hit, but it wasn't unovercomable,
Correct.
And it wasn't an amount that was so like it's going to, cripple your family. 100% agree. You need to set it up from the get-go. Create an LLC, you can go LegalZoom and do that pretty easily by yourself. Yeah. You could outsource the lawyer part of it and just kind of pay per service and things like that. But I think so many people get caught up in some of these little things like, well, I could potentially lose a lot of money, or what happens if the product comes back and it's not great, or whatever.
Done that.
There's going to be there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that pop up that are not, but it's part of the process, and
yeah.
I think, I want to kind of end the show a little bit with, just part of that, how you've taken some of this, and I don't know this actually. I don't know this to be 100% true, but I would imagine that you put a lot of the profits, especially early, back into the company to kind of keep it up and going, and really maybe out of pocket, didn't maybe come out of pocket a ton up front. What would be your advice for that coach to kind of like manage the money conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Yeah, no, again, I never really started the company to try to get out of coaching. I started to serve a need. And to this day, I've never taken a paycheck out of the company. We've just kind of put it back in there. I've used that money to hire people,
Right.
to run it. So for me, it's just about so I can continue to have a great product and still give back to the profession. Give so much back to me. In fact, my wife, when we got married, you open the books up, she's like, what are you doing here? Like you're not making that much money on this. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's okay. Like,
Right.
this is, and she's like, well, you spent so much time, effort, and energy in it. I'm like, yeah, but there's what you get back in return on that. But I think, from a money standpoint, I had a little bit of money from doing some side hustle stuff with training. And the joke about me is I still have my first communion money. I don't I don't spend a lot. If there's something I want, I'll get it. But
Right.
I think again, just being smart fiscally about what you're doing. At the end of the day, it's try to limit your overhead and most of your costs that you got associated with that, and buy as little as you can and sell as much as you can. But for me, I just never got caught up into the money side of it. Maybe you're not getting to the audience. Maybe I get that, but again, it was just a situation where we were fulfilling a need for what I needed, and then from there, I knew I needed money to do it. So I went out and got enough money to be able to kick off and get going with what we needed to do. And again, that's I would say stay away from asking somebody to lend you money.
Right.
Like, or when you're starting it off, because to me, I heard a great quote from a business guy. He said, venture capitalists are like hitchhikers. They're really good until you want to go somewhere that they don't want to.
Right.
And I never wanted to be tied to that. I never really dreamt that it would be a situation where I'm going to remove myself from coaching because I've got this nutritional product and this is what we want to do. I just wanted to help myself and my peers. But I think, again, there's a fiscal part to that too. And again, you have a lot of resources where, hey, what's that going to look like? What's that going to cost? I think that has to all happen on the front end.
Right. Well, I think you're playing the long game too, right? Like, I mean,
correct.
Just because you haven't taken money out, and there's nothing wrong with taking money out or making a paycheck.
No, hell no, there isn't. No, absolutely not.
For people, but I mean, what you have done is, one, you've built up a wealth of knowledge that can be applied to anything if needed be, right? If Clemson came downstairs and said, "See you later,"
yeah,
you would be okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you've created an asset that you could liquidate at some point, if you needed to. You could sell the company or whatever, right? And so I think the biggest thing, and maybe kind of final question here is, so for that high school coach that is barely making ends meet, that is struggling to pay their bills every month, that has that young family that they want to spend more time with, how would you encourage them to go about finding their critical reload or their idea to be able to go out and create some passive income for their family?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think at the end of the day, you got to find something else that you're passionate about in what you do. And I don't think it has to maybe necessarily be in strength conditioning. It just so happened mine did. Like,
Right.
I know some strength coaches that are really good in woodworking, and they kind of did that as a hobby. And that has actually turned into their opportunity now. That's their side hustle, is they go in and they're hanging the barn doors. They're
Right.
creating barn doors and hanging it. They go in and do some renovations and just knick-knack stuff. They do a really good job, and they charge a lot of money to do that. It's kind of funny. And but I think you just got to look at your hobby, see what you like to do outside of strength conditioning. And if that's something that's a passion, and just kind of look at that and say, hey, man, is this something that I can do that still allows me to be a strength coach and kind of fuel that part of it. I don't think what you because you're in strength and conditioning, you have to find something strength and conditioning that you need to do. It can be completely separate from that.
Absolutely.
Just go find, just look at your hobbies, see what you're doing, and say, hey man, could somebody benefit from that? And
that's that meaningful distraction. I mean, that's just having something that's
a great way to say it. Yeah.
Outside of what you're doing. We actually had Zach Hooten on the show who does that.
Zach, yes, exactly. Yeah. South Florida.
And, he's doing the woodworking, but well, man, you're a serial entrepreneur. That's why we're such good friends. I mean, we're constantly talking about, we're going to definitely have you on the show to talk about DWMA and some of the other things that you've done to create some other revenue streams. But I think, if anything, if you don't walk away inspired by this, to show how, here's a coach that's put, that for 16 years has ran a company that's generated tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for other high school programs, really just in a way to, to give back to the community. It's inspiring, and appreciate you coming on, man. And thanks so much for being a friend, but also sharing your information with everybody that's listening.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. Really, really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. And, you don't have to, if you want to reach out to me and talk shop, you don't have to buy anything. I'll be glad to, I'll probably be able to tell you more of what not to do than I will be able to tell you what to do, even after 16 years. So, glad to have the opportunity. Thanks, Ron. Really appreciate it, man.
That's it for this week's episode of Overtime. Thanks to this week's guest and our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about my other projects. While there, make sure you join me in thanking our guest for sharing in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, search Ron McKeefery on YouTube or Overtime on any of the podcast directories. Ratings and reviews are always appreciated, and they help me to help as many coaches as I can. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Overtime.